Discovering Insert Wine Here. We love making new discoveries about wines, so we thought we would share some of that with you. We will be rolling out a new subscription series called Discovering Insert Wine Here. Each month, we will choose a wine to discuss and pair and do a live Zoom with our subscribers. Now, when I say wine, we will keep this simple, but it will be something that you can find locally or order. During our Zoom, you will learn about the wine, the style, and the region. Then we will taste, pair, and share our thoughts. I'll finish with the recipe to show you how simple making the dish can be. If you can't join us live, we will share the recording so you can watch it later. Discovering Insert Wine Here. So to get us started, we're talking about Riesling today. So on the screen here, you're going to see this is one of my favorite Rieslings. It's from a smaller winery that's located up in Oregon called Trisatum, which is actually, I think, an abbreviation of his children's names put together. And he's an artist, an amazing artist, but they have this winery up there in Oregon. And this is his Coast Range Riesling, and it's a dry Riesling that they have up there. And because of where it's grown on the Oregon coast, it tends to have this great salinity to it. It often reminds me of having a little bit of sea spray on it, which I think is really interesting in a Riesling. So it's one that really kind of captivated me. So if you're ever up in the Oregon area, so obviously, Eric, this is one that's on your list. It's in the Ribbon Ridge AVA, so I'll give you details on that when you guys go. So we're celebrating Riesling. We were going to do this last month. Riesling Day is actually held each year on March 13th, and the Wines of Germany set that date up. The reason for it was that was the date of the first recorded invoice for Riesling grapes. But mind you, that first invoice was in 1435. So Riesling's been around for a little while. We're going to talk today a little bit about the origins of Riesling in Germany. This is a picture of the Mosel Valley. We'll go on and talk about how it is grown also in France. This is a picture of Alsace on the one side, and then in Austria, and that's a picture of the Wachau Valley on the other side, and beyond. So we'll talk about some of the other areas that it's grown in. Then we'll stick our noses in the glass and we'll talk about the aromas and the flavors and the impressions and how they can differ depending on the age and the style of the wine. We'll talk about sweetness levels because you can get Rieslings anywhere from dry to sweet. And the names for those, because it's traditionally a German wine, are all in German and they're all not terribly easy to pronounce. So we're going to dive into some of those too. We'll talk about our grazing board, what everybody picked and how they think it's going with the different wines that they have. And we'll talk about some of our favorite things to eat along with Rieslings. And we'll go through some of those. And along the way, we're going to talk about the different wines that we got and how the flavors are for those and what we've got in our glass and what we think about them. So let's get started with a little background on Riesling. So that's a beautiful bunch of Riesling grapes there in the picture. You can see how golden they are. They get very golden as they ripen and they get sweeter. This is a picture of the Mosel Valley in Germany. And that's a place that Riesling thrives. And it's kind of one of the good places that it originates from. So Riesling is a white grape, obviously, and it does really well in cooler climates. It's also a high acid grape and it's frost resistant. When I say high acid, this is a grape that as it's getting riper, holds on to its acidity. So sometimes, when fruit gets riper, like if you get a peach and you crunch on it and it's not really ripe, then it has a lot of acid to it. It's really kind of tart. And then when it ripens up, it gets really sweet and you get more sugar off it and you don't have that much acid. With grapes, some grapes, like Riesling, tend to hold on to their acidity while they increase their sugars, which is why you can have a sweet Riesling and it still has good acidity to it. So it's still got that tartness that makes it go well with wine, and it doesn't allow it to become cloying, like cloyingly sweet. When we talk about the places in Germany that it grows, you'll find it along the river valleys. And one of the reasons for that is because The rivers and bodies of water help to moderate climate. So if you've got a river or a lake or you're near the ocean, the temperatures in the summertime are going to be cooler and the temperatures in the wintertime are going to be warmer. So it keeps them from being going to those extremes of heat and cold during the year, which is really helpful for growing the grapes. This is the picture of the Mosel, and most of the Riesling in Germany is going to be grown. It's all on the west coast of Germany, the western edge of Germany, and that's where you'll find it thriving. They've got really interesting soils there too. They're slate soils. And part of the reason for that is that area used to be cooler. It's warmed up with climate change. So these valleys, the south facing slopes there have gotten warmer. But it used to be that these slate rocks that they would have, that red and black slate, would reflect the heat up to the vines to help them to ripen during the season, to be able to get them ripe enough so they could make the sweet wines. In addition, you'll see how steep these vineyards are. So you can see the guy here with the basket on his back, and he's working his way up the hill. One of the things about Riesling, I think we all think of Riesling immediately, we think of sweet Rieslings. The reason we think of that is because those tended to be the highest quality Rieslings. And the reason for that is the labor that goes into them. In vineyards like this, they'll go through and they won't just pick the grapes when they're ripe. They go through and pick them at different ripeness levels. So if they pick them when they're a little bit less ripe, then you're going to get a less sweet wine. And as the sugar builds up, they go through again and they pick some that are at a sweeter level. And there's even some of the wines that they'll pick individual berries rather than picking the whole cluster. They'll individually pick berries that they know are the ripeness level and sweetness level. So you can see that that becomes very labor intensive again, and they're working by hand because they can't do this mechanically really because of where the vines are and because of how steep it is. So it's a really labor intensive process. This is a picture of Alsace, France. So Riesling in France grows primarily in Alsace, which is the northeastern part of France. And so it's right across the border from where the Riesling is being grown in Germany. This part of France went back and forth depending on the wars of whether it was part of Germany or part of France. It is now part of France since World War II. And it is also the area that has the most organic vineyards in all of France as far as a region. The picture here is of a village called Hunuer in Alsace. And I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to interview a winemaker from here, Carolyn Sipp, who runs a vineyard with her father and her family there. And you can see this is her and her family in the vineyard with their dogs. You can see she's right behind the church that's in the picture up here because their vineyard is the vineyard that goes all around the church. This town of Hunuer has about 600 people in it. And centuries ago, when this building was a castle, and when the castle was abandoned, the town took it over and it became the town church. But they have both Protestants and Catholics there, and they basically just they share the church. They just set their own service times and they share the same church. And I thought that's really kind of a great thing within a small community. But it's a beautiful, beautiful area. This is a picture of the Wachau region in Austria along the Danube River. So again, we've got that theme of being along a river that goes really well with Riesling. You can see it's fall and all the vines have turned into that beautiful golden color there. Another place that you'll find Riesling is in Italy. And this is kind of a strange region for Riesling in Italy. It's called Oltreppo Pavese, and it's in the Lombardia region, which is north central Italy. And it's kind of a one-off kind of grape that they found down there and that they're growing in this region. And they grow a lot of Pinot Noir in the region also, but they're growing Riesling. And I had an opportunity a little while ago to have this wonderful one from Cagafrara called Olivia. That's a beautiful Riesling from that region. A couple of other regions that they grow a lot of Riesling in would be Alto Adige, which again is up in the northeastern part of Italy, up in the Dolomite Mountains, which kind of makes sense. It's a higher elevation region. So that's a picture of the Dolomites there. Also in Friuli, which is a little bit further east there in Italy. And if you continue east from Friuli, then you run into Slovenia, and they are growing some Riesling there also. Then you have the Finger Lakes region, which Nancy has the white Wegner wine from. So the Finger Lakes, again, we're back to that whole theme of water, right? Because these are deep glacial lakes. And so they moderate the temperature for the vines on the sides of the lakes. So you'll have Probably the best known Rieslings in our country come from the Finger Lakes region. They're very well known for them. You'll also find some in Washington, especially along the Columbia River Gorge, because again, you've got the water there, and there's some grown in Oregon and some grown in California also. In Australia, you will find them in the Clare Valley and the Eden Valley, as well as in Tasmania, because of course we're in the southern hemisphere there. So as you go south into Tasmania, it's a cooler climate. So Riesling does well there. In the Clare Valley and the Eden Valley, they make all levels of sweetness for the wines there for the Rieslings, but they also make a very, very sweet Riesling wine there, and they call them stickies. So kind of let you know exactly how sweet they are there. So as we're talking about the sweetness levels, let's dive into some of the crazy German names for the sweetness levels. Often you will find these names, or you'll find a little uh, sweetness level diagram on the back of the bottles from Germany to let you know whether it's a dry or if it's a sweet wine. So sometimes they'll have those on the back of the bottle. In Germany, the first level is called Cabinet, and that's the least sweet. So that's the driest level that you'll get. Beyond that, the next level is called Spätlese, and Spätlese means late harvest. And so there is a designated picking day that the government sets up saying after anything picked after this date can be labeled as Spätlese. And because it's been picked later, it's got more sugars that have built up in the wines in the grapes. Beyond that, you go to Auslese, and Auslese is select harvest. And with these, they have to have reached all the grapes have to have reached a certain sugar level before they can be included into the wine, and so it's going to be a sweeter one there. Now we start to get into the longer names. Beerenauslese, which means selected berries. This is when, like I said, they will go through the vineyard and they'll pick the berries individually. So the individual grapes off of the bunches. And they have to be at a very certain sweetness level before they can do that. Included in this is often some of the wines with botrytis, the grapes with botrytis. Is anybody familiar with botrytis or noble rot? Yes, I see Kevin and Eric are there. So botrytis is basically the way that they make sauternes in France and also tokayazu in Hungary. And hopefully everybody out there likes blue cheese. Any blue cheese like lovers out there? Okay. All right, good. So think of it kind of like blue cheese. This is a mold that because these areas are near water, that you'll get fog in the morning, and the moisture and the fog will cause this botrytis, which is a mold, to go onto the grapes. It pokes little holes in the grapes, which means that the grapes start to lose some of their moisture. In the afternoon, things dry off and it gets sunny, and the botrytis stops growing. And it does this every morning, and the grapes get more and more shriveled, and it condenses the sugars. And then they're pressed off of that. And actually, the mold itself adds some lovely, like cashew notes to the wine sometimes. And that makes a very sweet wine. Now, the Baron Auslese don't have to be all botrytis wines, but they can be included in that. And the other thing at the sweetness level is ice wine. Has anybody out there ever had ice wine? Okay, a couple of people. So ice wine is basically where they it has to be at a Beerenauslese sweetness level, right? So it has to be the grapes have to be a certain sugar level, but then they leave them on the vine sometimes as late as January, and that's so that they will freeze on the vine. And then they bring them in and they press them off. They press the ice off of them and the skins off of them, and you have a concentrated juice. So again, it's going to be sweeter then. And then we get to the final level, which is the really long name, Trockenbeerenauslese. So most people call it TBA, or it's selected dried berries. And basically with these, they will pick the ripe berries and then they lay them on trays and let them dry out in a room that has some airflow to it. And they dry for several months, and then they press them to get the concentrated juice out of them. And so that becomes the Trockenbeerenauslese wines. So you can see they get sweeter as they go up. They also get much more labor intensive as they go up. So the Trockenbeerenauslese typically are going to be the more expensive of the wines. So that's why typically German wines, when we think of Rieslings, we think of the sweet wines because they were the most expensive wines. and the most labor intensive. So again, we're going from Cabernet, which is the least sweet, all the way up to Trockenbeeren Auslesen, which is the most sweet. So what's in your glass? Tell us where your wines are from, what styles you've got, sweet or dry, and any details you learned about your wines. As we are fine-tuning the subscription details for the next couple months, we invite you to join us for free. If you're interested in joining us, email me at robin@42aspens.com and I'll send you the details.